When the diplomatic cruiser Dawn's Light first detected the incoming human vessel, Ambassador Zathriel pressed his elongated fingers against the transparent observation wall and narrowed his violet eyes in curiosity. The vessel was on the smaller side compared to the imposing ships that usually traverse Coalition trade routes, yet it was known for exceptional maneuverability. What baffled the ambassador most, indeed, what baffled almost every non-human in the Galactic Coalition, was the humans' notorious lack of a dedicated medical bay. According to every database, the human craft carried only minimal medical supplies, scattered throughout the ship, with no centralized facility. Zathriel, a methodical observer by nature, found this utterly confounding. In the centuries since the Coalition's formation, no species had dared venture into deep space without a proper medical facility. The humans, however, insisted they had no need for it. He turned to his aide, a short, scaled individual named Rian, whose species favored shimmering turquoise patterns along their tails. Rian was focusing on a console that displayed the incoming vessel's specifications, eyes flicking with agitation. Zathriel, for all his famed diplomatic tact, could not resist a note of disbelief in his voice. They once again show up with no sign of a proper med bay. Their hull structure is well fortified, their engineering capabilities top-notch, but why would they neglect something so critical? His voice emerged with the melodic undertones typical of his species, yet tinged with genuine bafflement. "Ambassador," Rian replied softly, "we have logged from half a dozen previous human ships making first contact tours. All have followed the same pattern. Minimal medical supplies, zero formal medical deck. It's become something of a running joke among Coalition scientists, but also a serious concern. If one of them suffers a grave injury in deep space, they have nowhere to go except tiny first aid stations or, as some claim, improvised triage corners." Rian's scales shifted color, a sign of mild unease. Zathriel folded his arms, still peering through the window at the approaching vessel. "It is beyond me how a species could see this as acceptable. Let's gather more data. We will greet them as we do any new diplomatic contact, but I want every detail on how they handle injuries." It seems, he hesitated, as though the notion itself were preposterous. "It seems they rely almost entirely on their own bodies to cope with wounds." When the docking clamps finally locked the human vessel into position, a short greeting chime resonated through the Dawn's Light. Ambassador Zathriel and his retinue, including Rian and 2 other staffers, made their way to Docking Portal 7, where the crew of the human ship, the Calgary Stampede, would disembark. The corridor shimmered under bright artificial lights, a carefully maintained environment suited to the many species who passed through it daily. Zathriel's thoughts churned. He recalled reading about certain obscure survival tactics humans had used centuries ago, climbing frigid mountains with minimal gear, crossing deserts alone, even returning to battlefields with severe injuries. If half those historical accounts were true, then perhaps these tales of ignoring pain or forging on despite wounds were more than exaggerated legends. At the portal, a tall, athletic human woman stepped forward. She wore a crisp uniform with subtle insignia, her posture confident and her expression friendly. This had to be Captain Andrea Serrano Powell, commander of the Calgary Stampede. Her brown hair was braided back, revealing a faint scar across one eyebrow. Zathriel smiled politely, performing the Coalition standard greeting, a slight bow with both hands open. The captain, in true human custom, extended her hand for a handshake. Zathriel followed protocol, though he remained uneasy with such direct physical contact. "Ambassador Zathriel," she greeted him, her voice warm yet professional. "We are honored to be received aboard the Dawn's Light. I trust our presence has not caused any confusion." A hint of humor lit her eyes, as though she fully understood the question on everyone's mind. Zathriel chose his words carefully. "Captain Powell, your vessel is most welcome. The Coalition respects the achievements of all species. We merely wonder about certain unique aspects of your ship's design." He made an elaborate gesture, shaped by centuries of diplomatic tradition, indicating curiosity rather than accusation. Powell chuckled. "Yes, I believe you're referring to our famously absent medical bay. We've heard the whispers. Humans, though we may seem fragile externally, have our own ways of handling injuries. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to discuss that detail. A sharp clang resounded behind Powell as another figure stepped through the docking tube. This one wore an engineering jumpsuit, stained with greasy smudges. He was balancing several canisters in his arms, apparently oblivious to the fact that one sleeve was torn at the elbow, revealing a streak of dried blood. Rian gaped in alarm, stepping forward. "Goodness, are you injured? We can escort you to our medical facilities." The scaled aide shifted colors from turquoise to near lime green, an instinctive reaction of concern. The engineer looked down at his arm, then let out a short laugh. "Oh, this? Just caught my arm on a loose bracket. I'll patch it up once I secure these canisters. No worries." He gave a friendly nod, ignoring Rian's mortified stare. Zathriel found himself momentarily speechless. Never had he encountered a species so casual about bodily harm, especially on a diplomatic mission. He gestured for them to proceed. "Very well," he said softly. "Let us move to the main reception area. We've prepared refreshments and an orientation session for your arrival." As the group moved down the corridor, the entourage of coalition staffers could not help glancing repeatedly at the human engineer's bloody elbow. Rian whispered to Zathriel, "They truly act as though it doesn't matter. This is insane. I've never—" Zathriel simply inclined his head, equally intrigued and unsettled. Was the rumor that humans felt pain, yet chose to press on actually true? If so, it defied everything they knew about the universal function of pain. Pain existed as a biological alarm, a sign to seek help. But humans, they apparently wrote their own rules. They arrived at the main reception chamber, a spacious hall lined with gleaming metal pillars and comfortable seating suited for various alien physiologies. Zathriel took his place behind a semicircular dais. Captain Powell and her top officers, including her first mate Jackson Reed Mercer and Dr. Leslie Park, a science officer with an affable smile, stood by politely. Several curious coalition dignitaries, representing at least 5 other species, observed from the sidelines. Zathriel spoke with a ceremonial clarity. "Members of the Calgary Stampede, on behalf of the Galactic Coalition, I welcome you. We have been anticipating your arrival and look forward to strengthening our mutual cooperation. Our station's facilities are at your disposal." He paused, carefully noting the tension in the room. "We also acknowledge certain differences in design philosophy between coalition standards and your own. However, we trust you will find comfort here." Powell stepped forward, acknowledging his welcome with a slight bow. "We appreciate the hospitality. We understand curiosity is high regarding our ship's layout, so let me reiterate we're open to peaceful inquiry. We simply have found that our approach is most efficient for humans." One of the other dignitaries, an Andarian with tall, bony crests, could not restrain himself. "Do you mean to say you prefer to be injured?" He sounded perplexed, voice echoing in the tall chamber. Powell grinned. "Not at all. We prefer not to get injured in the first place, of course. But if it happens, we have robust bodies and an adaptable medical strategy." At that moment, the battered engineer stepped in from behind, having presumably dropped off his canisters. He now wore a simple bandage taped haphazardly around his elbow. He gave a thumbs up in Powell's direction, as if to indicate he was perfectly fine. The Andarian dignitary let out a soft hiss of disbelief. Zathriel decided to shift topics. "Captain, may we proceed with a short orientation session? We'd like to update you on certain security concerns at the edges of coalition territory." Powell nodded, her expression turning serious. "Of course. The faster we settle formalities, the sooner we can coordinate. I believe there's been talk of increased pirate or raider activity in the Araxis sector." The conversation flowed more formally after that, focusing on trade routes, border disputes, and the new wave of hostilities rumored to come from a predatory species known as the Rizak or possibly the Kriaks. But behind every word, the tension remained. The coalition staff kept glancing at each human's posture, searching for signs of discomfort or hidden injuries, while the humans collectively seemed at ease. When the orientation concluded, Zathriel invited the human officers to share a communal meal in the large mess hall, a tradition to break down social barriers. Powell and her companions agreed readily, and soon they were in a bright dining area with tables adapted to multiple species. The servers brought a variety of dishes, carefully curated for the humans' biochemistry. Sitting together, the two groups made polite conversation. Zathriel found the humans simultaneously down-to-earth and perplexing. One moment, they made light jokes about Earth's gravity being just right for building strong muscles, and the next, they described being shot at by pirates with an odd nonchalance. As they passed plates along the table, Zathriel noticed Captain Powell wince slightly as she reached too far. Concerned, he asked, "Captain, are you hurt?" "Just a minor pull on my shoulder," Powell replied. "I strained it during our last day's security drill. Don't worry, it'll loosen up with some rest." Zathriel considered calling a medic from the Dawn's Light immediately, but he recognized that the humans' responses were consistently relaxed. Dr. Park, the science officer, chimed in with a grin. "If it doesn't, she'll just duct tape a hot pack to it." Rian, seated nearby, nearly dropped the utensil he was holding. "Duct tape? For therapy?" Powell and Park laughed in unison. "We do that quite often," Park confirmed. "It's a long-running joke in human culture. If something's broken, duct tape will fix it." Across the table, the Andarian dignitary stared open-mouthed, as though the mere mention of such rudimentary measures left him speechless. Zathriel's diplomatic instincts flared. He worried that lines of offense might be crossed. However, the humans did not appear the least bit embarrassed. They wore their casual approach like a badge of honor. The meal ended without further incident, but as they rose from the table, an urgent communication arrived. The station's automated security channels had picked up a distress signal from a nearby sector. Tension rippled through every being present. Zathriel and Powell hurried to the nearest control console, where a coalition officer relayed what had happened. "Unidentified vessel," said the officer. "Massive power signature. We've seen similar patterns from the Kriax hunters, predatory warships that target smaller craft. They might consider the Dawn's Light or the Calgary Stampede to be prime hunting targets if they detect unique life signs." Powell's smile vanished. "Kriax? We've only heard rumors. Are they truly that vicious?" Zathriel gave a grim nod, recalling the intelligence reports. "They're known to breach ships, capture or kill crews for sport. We must be prepared." What followed was a flurry of strategic planning. The Dawn's Light remained a diplomatic vessel with moderate defenses. The Calgary Stampede, though smaller, had advanced weaponry. Powell suggested a joint response to the distress call. Perhaps their combined presence would intimidate the Kriax. Zathriel, while uneasy, recognized it might be necessary. There was no one else in the sector capable of immediate rescue. They launched within the hour, the two ships departing the station in formation. Zathriel accompanied the humans aboard the Stampede, partly out of curiosity, partly out of necessity. As ambassador, he needed to witness any encounter with these hostile forces. The ship's corridors were tighter than he expected, humming with energy. He studied each section carefully, seeking a large medical ward, but found only small storage compartments labeled MED supplies or emergency first aid. The humans insisted it was all they required. It wasn't long before trouble found them. With a jolt, the entire vessel lurched as gravitational distortions flared on sensors. The Calgary Stampede's alarm klaxons went off, painting the corridors in harsh red light. Zathriel, bracing against a bulkhead, heard frantic voices over the intercom. "Contact on deck 4. Hull integrity compromised. They've latched onto us with some gravitational clamp system. Internal sensors detect borders." Borders? The Kriax had come. Zathriel's heart, or equivalent organ, pounded. He and Rian exchanged nervous glances. Meanwhile, Captain Powell's expression became steely. She snapped into immediate action, issuing commands to her bridge crew. "All security teams, deck 4. Dr. Park, set up a triage center in Cargo Bay 2. Commander Mercer, coordinate defense lines. Non-essential personnel, move to safe compartments." Zathriel felt compelled to point out the obvious. If there are serious injuries, your triage center is just an open cargo area, isn't it? Powell nodded. Yes. It's big, easy to access, and we can lay out cots and supplies quickly. Don't worry, we'll manage. Our engineering team will seal any compromised sections. We can't let them disable the engines. Rian, wide-eyed, asked softly, and if you get badly wounded? Some of these Kriak's weapons reportedly cause severe plasma burns. Powell checked the sidearm strapped to her thigh. We've got burn salves, bandages, and about 50 determined humans who refuse to lie down and quit. Sometimes that's enough. Before anyone could reply, the entire ship rocked again. The deck heaved violently, sending Zathriel staggering. Over comms, a frantic voice reported, Kriak's boarding party has breached airlock 4B. They're heading for engineering. Powell snarled a human expletive, then turned to Zathriel. Ambassador, I suggest you find secure quarters. The corridor ahead leads to a reinforced lounge. You're safer there. But Zathriel began, wanting to protest that he should observe. Yet he saw the determination in Powell's gaze and nodded. Very well, I'll comply. He could sense the storm they were about to face. Humans with no dedicated med bay, about to fend off a vicious predator race known for brutal close-quarters combat. Everything he had read suggested this would be a bloodbath. He hurried after Rian, heartsick at the thought of what might unfold. From that reinforced lounge, which served as an impromptu safe room, Zathriel watched security camera feeds on a wall panel. He saw terrifying glimpses of the Kriaks, tall, spindly-limbed creatures with exoskeleton plating and scythe-like appendages. They moved with unnerving speed through the corridors, advanced weaponry buzzing with lethal energy. Yet the humans met them head-on. He witnessed firefights where humans, outnumbered, held key choke points. Even as some were struck, battered, or thrown aside, they kept firing, refusing to retreat. If one soldier fell with a broken arm, they stabilized it with a quick brace, sometimes a rigid piece of metal and a roll of bandaging tape, and continued shooting with their other hand. Again and again, Zathriel saw scenes that would have sent any coalition soldier begging for a medevac. Blood was spilled, plasma scorched flesh, but the humans grimly pressed forward. In a particularly harrowing feed, he recognized Captain Powell herself, sidearm blazing, flipping a Kriak's attacker over the railing. She took a claw swipe across her abdomen, a blow that might be fatal for other species. Powell dropped to one knee for a moment, gritted her teeth, then forced herself up and fired another round, sending the Kriaks sprawling. Moments later, a crewman rushed over, pressed a coagulant pack against Powell's bleeding side, and the captain rose to her feet, rejoining the fight without hesitation. Zathriel found his breath quickening. He turned to Rian, who watched with an equal mix of horror and awe. They're acting as though these injuries are minor, Rian whispered, eyes flicking from turquoise to yellow in emotional turmoil. This defies everything we know. An explosion rocked the corridor outside engineering. Sparks showered the camera feed. A group of humans dragged a fallen comrade to a side corridor, quickly wrapped a pressure bandage around a gaping wound in his leg, then gave him a painkiller injection. In less than 3 minutes, that same soldier was on his feet, limping but functional, rifle in hand. It was an unthinkable cycle. Get hurt, patch the wound, keep fighting. They truly needed no specialized med bay. Any open space, any corner, became an ad hoc treatment station. All the while, Dr. Park managed the cargo bay triage area, stitching deep lacerations, administering fluids, and instructing conscious patients to help each other while she moved on to the next. Zathriel realized each human was effectively both patient and medic, relying on a combination of knowledge, improvised tools, and extraordinary physical resilience. Minutes turned to hours, though it felt longer. The Kriak's infiltration team was whittled down by a relentless defense. Eventually, the final intruders, perhaps seeing their advantage slip away, retreated to their boarding craft. As soon as they fled, the residual gravitational clamp on the Calgary Stampede released, allowing the ship's engines to roar back to life. The corridor feeds showed battered humans exchanging shaky fist bumps, adrenaline still surging. Some slumped against walls, breathing hard, as if only now acknowledging the pain in their bodies. A short while later, Powell's voice emerged over the intercom. All hands stand down from battle stations. Casualty assessment. DR. Park, let me know who needs immediate attention. Good job, everyone. We protected the ship. Zathriel, relieved beyond measure, unsealed the reinforced lounge. He ventured out with Rian and found entire sections of corridor scorched, littered with debris. Human crew, many with dry blood and torn uniforms, were setting to work cleaning up the aftermath. Even those with bandaged limbs or shallow burn marks insisted on contributing. The ambassador had never seen such a dogged refusal to rest. But what he found in the cargo bay triage area nearly overwhelmed him. Wounded humans lay on makeshift cots, some receiving rudimentary stitches or burn gel. A tall medic with gray hair, perhaps Dr. Elias Okafor, moved swiftly among them, dispensing instructions. One woman had a deep laceration across her thigh. Zathriel watched as Dr. Okafor irrigated it, applied a topical sealant, then pressed a fresh bandage in place. The woman bit her lip, but soon forced a weak smile. "Thanks, Doc," she managed. "Should be up in an hour, right?" Zathriel wanted to cry out. "An hour? You've lost half a liter of blood." But he held his tongue, uncertain how to respond. Captain Powell, with a thick bandage taped across her abdomen, stood near a control panel, scanning damage reports. She stiffened slightly as Zathriel approached. A faint sheen of sweat covered her brow, though her eyes still gleamed with determination. "Ambassador," she greeted, mustering a courteous nod. "I hope you remain safe." Zathriel's voice emerged shakily. "I did, thanks to your crew's defense. But, Captain, you are all gravely injured. This is no trifling matter. My recommendation is that we dock with the Dawn's Light or another coalition vessel equipped with proper medical facilities." Powell shook her head. "We won't turn away serious assistance if it's needed, but I can assure you we've got this under control. If any injuries prove life-threatening, Dr. Okafor will let me know. We'll stabilize them. The rest of us will heal in time. No sense in halting our entire mission." At that moment, a communications officer's voice crackled over Powell's earpiece, announcing that the Kriak ship was in retreat. The coalition distress signal they had come to investigate had been from a smaller merchant vessel, which the Kriaks had apparently attacked first. The merchant ship managed to escape due to the timely arrival of the Calgary Stampede. Now, it appeared the threat had subsided, at least temporarily. Zathriel exhaled, grappling with the swirling mixture of relief, admiration, and shock. "Captain, I must confess that your people's ability to function despite injuries is unprecedented. I see no standard med bay, yet you do tree off here in a cargo bay. Many of your crew are walking around with serious wounds, acting as though it's a mere inconvenience." Powell folded her arms, taking a slow breath. "Humans evolved under some rough conditions on Earth. We learned to keep going no matter what. Pain is real, and injuries can be severe, but we adapt, push forward, and rely on each other. We have advanced facilities back on our homeworlds. In deep space, though, we carry enough to support the body's natural healing processes. For us, that's enough." Rian, who had been quietly observing, asked, "Doesn't advanced technology accelerate your healing? Though, why not equip your vessel with full regeneration tanks, or at least specialized surgeries?" Dr. Okafor joined them, removing bloody gloves and rubbing his eyes wearily. "We do have advanced medical technology on Earth and major colonies, certainly. But on these ships, we've learned to prioritize versatility. We train everyone in first aid, we keep portable kits in every section, and we rely heavily on our natural immune responses. Too many big, specialized machines or dedicated wards would cost space and power. Our approach is to be ready anywhere, at any time." Zathriel's mind spun. He recalled how the Coalition mandated extensive medical decks precisely because every known species, from the Andarians to the scale Voltari, needed specialized environments for healing. Yet humans had circumvented this universal assumption with their own biology. They turned adversity into advantage. In the days that followed, the Calgary Stampede and the Dawn's Light traveled together, ensuring the merchant ships in the sector felt secure. During that time, Zathriel witnessed human resilience in quieter moments. He saw crew members whose arms were in slings or whose torsos were wrapped in compression bandages continuing to do their duty, albeit at a slower pace. He observed how they used simple objects, splints, band-aids, self-adhering wraps, to manage injuries that would ordinarily require extensive hospitalization for other species. One such quiet moment occurred when Zathriel visited the engineering deck. He found that same engineer who had casually bandaged his elbow on the first day. Now, the man was crouched beneath a humming console, calibrating a plasma intake system, an improvised brace around his wrist. Zathriel could smell a mild antiseptic. "How's the arm?" he asked, crouching next to the engineer. The man glanced over with a grin. "Good as new in a few more days, Ambassador. Just a little stiff." He flexed his fingers slightly, wincing, then continued working. "Got too many tasks to sit around." That's the human way. Zathriel caught himself marveling at the calm acceptance. Perhaps humans had no illusions about being unbreakable. They simply refused to let injuries define them. Some evenings, after the combined crews handled routine patrols, they gathered in a communal lounge to relax. Zathriel heard laughter echo from the humans, jokes about walking off bullet wounds, playful recountings of how old Earth explorers survived on minimal rations for weeks. It felt surreal, but also oddly admirable. Rian confided in Zathriel one evening. "It's terrifying but also inspiring. They treat injuries as an inconvenience, not a crisis. I wonder if they simply have different pain thresholds or if they've trained themselves to endure." Zathriel could only respond, "I suspect it's both." And more. A short time later, a coalition intelligence report reached them. Another Kriax vessel had been detected deeper in the sector, possibly preparing an ambush. Powell and Zathriel weighed their options. They could wait for a larger coalition task force to arrive, or they could strike preemptively, hoping to catch the marauders off guard. The humans, unsurprisingly, leaned toward immediate action, while Zathriel worried about the partial repairs still underway on the Stampede. "We're still patching our outer hull," Powell admitted. "Dr. Okafor has at least 15 moderately wounded crew, but they'll be functional soon. If we wait, the Kriax might slip away and ambush another unsuspecting ship. I'd rather face them now." Zathriel swallowed. He hated war, but he recognized the merit of preventing further attacks. "Very well," he said. "I will accompany you again. If we can neutralize or drive them off, it will save many lives." "But Captain, can you truly fight in your condition? You're still healing from your abdominal wound." Powell placed a hand over a bandaged side. "The analgesics help, and I heal quickly enough. If I need a break, Commander Mercer or Lieutenant Hayashi can take the lead. Humans share command responsibilities." And so was decided. The final confrontation with the Kriax was set. The Dawn's Light, ironically the more diplomatic of the two, agreed to stand by for support, while the Calgary Stampede would confront the marauder vessel. Zathriel and Rian joined Powell on her bridge, tension thick in the recycled air as they prepared for confrontation. The battered but defiant crew braced themselves, double-checking weapons and hull integrity. When the Kriax warship emerged on sensors, it wasted no time, launching energy pulses that rocked the Stampede's shields. Human gunners fired back with practiced ferocity. Despite the ship's battered state, they maneuvered with shocking agility, weaving around Kriax blasts. Zathriel had never seen such skillful piloting. Even though many humans were still taped up or limping, they were all at their posts, faces set in determination. A direct hit sent power fluctuations through the Stampede systems. Lights flickered, consoles sparked. Cries came over the comm. "Hull breach near Deck 3. Minor decompression." Another voice added, "Lieutenant Santos is injured. Plasma burned to the shoulder. Possible nerve damage. We're stabilizing her near Section 3C." Zathriel felt a stab of despair. "Captain, we're losing." But Powell's voice rose, unyielding. "We are not losing. Focus weapons on their forward batteries. Engineering, reroute power to the starboard thrusters. Keep us moving." She grimaced, probably feeling the pain of her own wound intensify, but she pushed on. At last, the Stampede managed to flank the Kriak's vessel, unleashing a concentrated barrage of railgun slugs and energy beams that shattered the enemy's outer defenses. The Kriak's ship listed, venting atmosphere, and began a hasty retreat. Cheers erupted on the Stampede's bridge. Zathriel dared to breathe again. One of the sensor operators confirmed the Kriaks were jumping to faster-than-light speeds, leaving the sector altogether. In the aftermath of the victory, the ship's corridors descended into a flurry of frantic but purposeful motion. Dr. Okafor and his assistants hurried from one injured crew member to the next. Burn gel, coagulant packs, and antiseptics littered every surface. Zathriel stepped carefully around them, deeply affected by the raw, relentless resourcefulness on display. He found a pocket-sized vantage point by the engineering bay, where two humans were hoisting a wounded comrade onto a makeshift stretcher crafted from a spare metal panel and a few straps. The wounded man, face pale from blood loss, still forced a reassuring grin. "Just a flesh wound," he mumbled in a half-delirious tone. A part of Zathriel wanted to scream that this was madness, that they all needed a state-of-the-art med bay, that the Coalition had entire decks dedicated to healing advanced injuries. And yet he couldn't deny the results. These humans, battered, bruised, and in dire pain, had just driven off a notoriously ruthless adversary. They had saved multiple ships. Their method might have been unorthodox, but it was undeniably effective. As emergency stabilization wrapped up, Powell reunited with Zathriel on the bridge, a fresh bandage crossing her left shoulder now. She also had a second layer of wrappings around her abdomen. Though her face was drawn and clearly fatigued, she wore the small smile of someone who'd accomplished what needed to be done. "Ambassador, you seem thoughtful," she observed gently, noticing his silence. "I have witnessed a new dimension of resilience," he replied, voice subdued. "Never in my lifetime have I seen such disregard for personal injury, yet it's not recklessness. You fight and heal, then fight again, as though stopping was never an option." Powell's expression softened. "We do stop eventually. We sleep, we recover. But in the heat of crisis, we can't afford to let injuries sideline us, so we make do." Several hours later, the final damage assessments were in. More than 30 humans had sustained moderate to severe wounds, though Dr. Okafor assured Zathriel that all were stable. The Dawn's Light offered to ferry the most critical cases to a full medical deck. A handful accepted, particularly those with injuries beyond the scope of field medicine. Yet many insisted on staying, proclaiming they would be up and about soon enough. On the third day after the battle, with the Kriaks gone from the sector and the Coalition's trade route secure, Zathriel prepared a comprehensive report for the High Council. He typed feverishly in a small side chamber, summarizing his observations of the humans and their near-total reliance on self-healing supplemented by minimal medical intervention. His conclusion was unambiguous. While the Coalition had always assumed that advanced medical facilities were essential to any deep space mission, the humans effectively rewrote that assumption. Their entire species approached injury as a temporary obstacle, leveraging their biology, grit, and basic tools to keep going. When he finished, he felt as though a weight had lifted, yet another settled in its place. This knowledge would reshape how the Coalition viewed humanity. Would they find it admirable or terrifying? Zathriel suspected the answer was both. Humans were not the only tough species, but the synergy of their natural healing, cultural mindset, and willingness to keep functioning despite pain made them formidable indeed. He found Captain Powell on the observation deck later that evening, gazing out at the streaking lights of subliminal travel. She looked exhausted but content, one arm in a sling, multiple bruises visible where her uniform had torn. Zathriel approached quietly and stood beside her. "We'll be returning to safer Coalition territory soon," he said after a quiet moment, his gaze traveling to the stars outside. I presume you'll need time for repairs and for your crew to recuperate properly. Powell smiled faintly. Yes, the Stampede deserves a good rest in space dock. We'll patch up the hull, let people catch their breath. Then we'll be off again on the next assignment. That's our role. Zathriel couldn't help but shake his head in wonder. And still no proper medical bay. Even after all this? She glanced at him, then back at the stars. We have everything we need, Ambassador. Maybe someday we'll incorporate bigger, more advanced facilities into future ships. But for now, we rely on our biology and our adaptability. She took a careful breath, wincing slightly. We don't see it as a weakness. We see it as exactly who we are. He considered that for several heartbeats. I used to think a species that felt pain would automatically retreat to medical care. You've shown me that's not always the case. Pain is information, Powell said softly. It tells us something's wrong, but it doesn't necessarily mean we have to stop living or doing our jobs. We adapt, we address the cause, and we move forward. In the weeks that followed, Coalition engineers assisted with the final structural repairs on the Calgary Stampede. Zathriel and Rian remained aboard as official liaisons. Crew members who had once fought with fresh injuries were now up and about, sporting only minor scars or scabs. The ease with which they navigated their recuperation left Zathriel in constant awe. He noticed how humans joked about, "That time I almost lost a leg," and "that time a Kriax plasma scythe nearly took my head," as though such traumas were badges of experience. By the time the Stampede was ready to depart, Zathriel had concluded that humanity's real medical facility was the entire crew itself. Their strong immune systems, rapid wound clotting, bone-knitting abilities, and unshakable mental resolve merged to form a living, mobile med bay in every corridor. It was barbaric from one perspective and ingenious from another. On the day of departure, the crew and visitors gathered in the main docking bay of the Dawn's Light for a brief farewell ceremony. Powell's sling was gone, replaced by only a small adhesive band at her shoulder. Dr. Okafor, sporting new scorch marks on his uniform, simply grinned through tired eyes. The rest of the humans had regained their typical cheerful confidence, as though the desperate battles were a distant memory. Zathriel, standing at the front, cleared his throat. "I want to thank you, Captain Powell, and your brave crew for protecting the lives of so many, including my own. I have recorded an extensive report for the High Council. They will learn that your lack of a centralized medical bay is not due to any deficit, but rather a reflection of your species' remarkable resilience and adaptability." He hesitated, then continued, voice filled with genuine respect. "In truth, your entire vessel is a medical bay, a place where adversity is treated with resourcefulness and unwavering willpower." Powell inclined her head. "Thank you, Ambassador. We humans are honored to stand alongside the Coalition. We just bring our own style to the table." A small ripple of laughter passed through the group. With that, Captain Powell and her officers returned to the Stampede, while Zathriel and his retinue stepped back onto station proper. The airlock sealed shut. In a swirl of thruster fire, the human cruiser pulled away from the docking clamps and vanished into the star-studded void. Zathriel watched them go, a swirl of pride and apprehension coursing through him. He knew the humans would likely find themselves in danger again sooner or later. But he also understood now, more than ever, that they would manage. They always did. Alone in the corridor, Rian turned to Zathriel, scales shimmering. "Ambassador, do you think the Council will truly change their classification of humanity?" Zathriel nodded slowly. "I do. They were previously considered a Class 3 threat, and I suspect they'll soon be upgraded to Class 1 potential. Even though they're friendly, any species capable of fighting while grievously wounded is a force to be reckoned with. We must treat them as valuable allies and, if it ever came to it, a daunting adversary." Rian sighed, shifting color to a thoughtful shade of cobalt. "Let's hope it never comes to that." Back in his quarters, Zathriel finished the final addendum to his report, summarizing the key lesson he had learned. Humans need no medical bay because they themselves are living healers, their resourcefulness and biology forging a synergy unmatched by other races. He concluded with a line from one of Captain Powell's many calm reassurances: "Humans don't need hospitals in space. We just need time." He sent the report to Coalition headquarters, aware that it might spark debate for years to come. Then he stood by the observation deck window, watching the vast emptiness stretch out before him. Somewhere out there, the Calgary Stampede was already plotting its next course, a battered ship helmed by battered humans who would, nonetheless, keep going. And that, to Zathriel's mind, was both the most inspiring and unsettling sight in the galaxy.